So offer leinemar ela bi offer melamed shashechet tzarich shitin offer lamata ba offer lamayla. It doesn't say dirt. Cover it dirt with. I don't know how you would. There's no preposition there, but you would say it says in the dirt. That means that you need dirt below and above. And here it's impossible in the temple to have dirt below. Why? How should we do this? You see, you're pouring the blood on the altar. Should we put the dirt on the altar and say, okay, we have a new layer of the altar. So, kamaisif habinyan, then you're adding to the structure of the altar. And uksiv, akol b'ksav, miyad Hashem alai hiskel. That David HaMelech told Shlomo in Divrei Yomi that he says that the structure of the architecture of the temple was given to him from Hashem, that he understood this from Hashem, and it has to be exact. You can't just add another layer to the altar of dirt because you're now going to slaughter a bird and you need dirt underneath the blood. So maybe loylavatle, maybe don't add to the layer don't add to the altar. Just say, I'm putting dirt on top of the altar. The altar ends there, and now there's a little dirt on top, sitting on top. Levatle means, do you nullify the dirt to the altar or not? If you nullify it to the altar, that means that becomes the floor of the altar. If you don't nullify it, that means that the altar is there, and I have dirt on top of the altar. The problem is, kavi chatzitza. You're supposed to pour it on the altar, not on dirt. You didn't pour it on the dirt. What are you going to do? You're going to put a protection over the altar so it doesn't get dirty or something like that. That doesn't count. You have to put it on the altar.
It would have been on the floor
because if you put dirt, then you pour the blood on the dirt. You didn't put it on the altar. So the Gemara says, "Nihidal matala yafshar, amayla yafshar."
But the altar is connected to the earth, no?
In the Mishkan.
Mishkan. Oh.
The Gemara asks, okay, so you don't have dirt below, but at least you'll do the other part. You'll do the dirt above. Just cover it from above. Like Tanya, was it not taught in a Braisa? Rabbi Yonasan ben Yosef Aimer. Rabbi Yonasan ben Yosef says, I'm not familiar with Shachat Chaya. If someone slaughters a wild animal, now a wild animal requires the blood to be covered, and then he slaughtered on top of this blood another domesticated animal that does not require the blood to be covered. So patur milachasis, he doesn't need to cover the wild animal because it got covered already. What's he going to cover? It's already he can't cover the blood of the wild animal. It's already covered by the domesticated animal, which has no obligation to be covered. However, the opposite, behema, if he first slaughters a regular animal, domesticated animal, and then he slaughters a wild animal, chayav l'chases. Now here, there was no dirt underneath. There's just the blood of an animal. Slaughtered on top of that a wild animal. You have to cover the blood. This is a proof that if you didn't do the bottom, at least you do the top. So granted, on a korban, you can't do the bottom, because we don't have any option to put dirt on the altar, but at least you should do the top. In other words, we don't have a source that you don't cover the blood by a sacrifice. Our only source is because it's not practical. So, but the bottom isn't practical, but do the top. So the Gemara says, K'der Rab Zera. Yes, by a regular sacrifice, if you didn't do the bottom, you do the top. But the reason for that is according to Rab Zera. Amar Rab Zera says, we learned in Menachem that when you bring a korban mincha, when you bring a meal offering, and you want to bring a large one, if you bring one that's 61 isarin, you have to bring 60 in one container and the one in another container because you have to mix the oil into it. And you can't mix 61 in this container. The largest container was 60 yisarin. So we said over there that, but 1 second, it says you don't need to mix it. Even if it's not mixed, it's kosher. So we said, yes, but you need to be able to mix it. And if you're able to mix it, then you don't have to mix it. But if you're not even able to mix it, then that's a problem. You have to be able to do it. You need the potential. So here also, by a regular sacrifice, you're not able to, but you're able to put blood on, to put dirt underneath, and you didn't. So you put blood on top. You were able to. But I'm sorry, by a regular animal, Dane animal, you're able to put the blood underneath, the dirt underneath, and you didn't. So you put the dirt on top. You cover it with dirt. By a carbon, there's no ability to put the dirt underneath. So therefore, you don't have to do the dirt on top either. As we were saying, we had a proof that you do the dirt on top, even if you didn't do the one underneath. But that's not a real proof, because that was kol haraya labila, because there was potential to do it. So you didn't have to do it. But by a sacrifice, there's no potential. So you're missing out on the mitzvah there. Okay. The Gemara has now an interesting question. It says, "V'ligurei v'lechasei." Go over to the altar wall, or to the altar floor, and scrape it off, and cover it over in dirt. Scrape off the dried blood. Milei Tanan, was it not taught in the Mishnah? Dam hanitas, the blood that spritzed, v'shalasakin, and the blood that's on the knife. Chayav l'chasis, so you have to cover that blood as well. Alma degara machasilei. It must be they're not covering the knife in dirt. It must be that they're scraping off the blood and they're covering it. Hachanami nigra v'nachasilei. Scrape it off and cover it. So our Mishnah said that you don't have to do it for sacrifices, and really you're able to do it on sacrifices. It just takes more effort. The Gemara says, "Ibakachi b'mizbeach hachanami." The truth is that when it comes to the sacrifices, that's true. Go ahead and scrape it off. Hachab mayaskinan, when our Mishnah says it doesn't apply to sanctified things, it uses the word sanctified. I probably translated it as sacrifices, but really the word was mukdashin. Hachab mayaskinan, here with what are we dealing with? Bekache bedek habayis. We're dealing with animals that were sanctified to the upkeep of the house. They are owned by the temple, but they're not sacrifices. Now, if these get slaughtered, they're supposed to be sold, and the money gets used to the temple. But if this went ahead and got slaughtered directly, so then you can't eat it. And what we're assuming here is that what type of shechita requires kisei adam, only shechita where it gets eaten. And these animals can't get eaten because they got slaughtered without being redeemed. So that's why you don't have to cover the blood by these sanctified animals, because it's not considered a real shechita because it doesn't get eaten. Now the Eily Sa'if.
So what are they doing with it?
A regular carbon so far.
Who's going to do it? The kohen or the person, the Baal? Idiotic up there. Kohen, fire, bones, blood. The last thing you need is layman running
Does
around.
it say whose mitzvah it is? I think it's. I don't remember. I think it's the sheikh's mitzvah. I think it belongs to
the
him.
sheikh is back there in the Azara. He's not doing the shechita by the.
Well,
by the
actually, by the bird, he's doing it on the altar.
Then it has to be a kohen.
Right. He's doing malika on the altar, right?
Yeah, that's a kohen.
Malak, he does it on the altar. So the Gemara says, 1 second. So we said this whole thing in the Mishnah is only talking about, it's not even talking about sacrifices, it's talking about these other animals, bedek habayis, animals that were donated to the temple, that weren't supposed to be slaughtered, they went ahead and slaughtered them. So, lifrakinu v'lechasinu. What's the problem? Go, redeem the meat, and then it's edible. And then you can cover the blood. Taisvus here points out, he says, who says you have to go and redeem the meat in order to create an obligation? He says really what it means is that because you're able to redeem the meat, so that means that it's kol harai, you had potential. So anything that had potential should be considered shechita ruya, should be considered that there's potential for it to be eaten. Why? Through redemption there's potential. If that's the case, then it's a real shechita. If it's a real shechita, then you would have to cover the blood. It's saying that you should redeem it and cover it. What it means to say you were able to redeem it and cover it. So why are you saying it's not a good shechita? So the Gemara says, "Binan hamadav aracha." You can't just go ahead and redeem it, because in order to redeem an animal, it has to stand up and it has to be evaluated. This animal, once it's shechted, can't stand. So it can't stand. You can't redeem it. It's one of the laws of redemption is missing. You're not able to redeem it anymore. The Gemara says, "Come on. Who are you saying our Mishnah according to?" Now, we were assuming that we're going according to Reb Shimon, that holds that a shechita that's not edible is not considered a good shechita. That was Reb Shimon's opinion. But he said, "Ikar Reb Meir," if you're going according to Reb Meir, that says that every animal, this is another machlekes, that Reb Meir holds that all animals need to be stood up and evaluated before they're redeemed. Ikar Reb Meir damra kol haya b'chlal hamadav aracha. If you're going according to Reb Meir, that says all animals are required, even bedek habayis, need to be stood up before they're redeemed, and that's why you can't redeem this animal. Reb Meir holds that it doesn't need to be an edible shechita. Reb Meir argues on Reb Shimon. He holds that even if it's not edible, it's still considered a shechita for Reisav Espanai. It should be a shechita over here as well to cover the blood. So what? You don't even need redemption. You're saying you can't do a redemption because you're going according to according to Reb Meir that says the animal needs to stand up. According to Reb Meir, you don't need to do a redemption at all. It's a regular shechita, cover the blood. Ikar Reb Shimon, if you're going to go according to Reb Shimon, that Reb Shimon holds that if the shechita is not edible, it's not a good shechita. He holds that bedek habayis doesn't need to be stood up to be redeemed. So go ahead and redeem the meat after it's slaughtered. You can redeem the meat from a slaughtered animal according to Reb Shimon. Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, this is Rav Yosef, the teacher of Abaya. This over here. Rav Yosef, you see. Rav Yosef on the...
Which page?
He's on the Amarayim page. You see Abaya, you go up one. That's Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef was the one that was blind, and Rabbi Yosef says, Rabbi, you asked who's the opinion of the Mishnah that says a sacrifice is not considered a sacrifice. A shechita is not considered a shechita if you can't eat it, and you also can't redeem it, and that's contradictory because it's either Reb Shimon or Rebbe. It's not a problem because it's either Reb Shimon or Reb Meir. Which opinion are you going like? Either way, it should be acceptable. It says it's really the opinion of Rebbe. Now, v'nasav la'aliba de Tanai, and Rebbe is choosing different opinions here in different machlekasin. Our problem was we were trying to be consistent. If it's Reb Meir's opinion regarding shechita, it should be Reb Meir's opinion regarding redemption. If it's Reb Shimon's opinion regarding shechita, it should be Reb Shimon's opinion regarding redemption. Comes along Reb Yosef and says, no, there's no consistency here. It's Rebbe that's choosing who the halachas like in different machlekasin. And Benasav Laliba de Tanai, and he placed it according to different Tanaim. B'shchita shein ruya, savalak Reb Shimon. He holds like Reb Shimon regarding shchita. Uba'amadav aracha savalak Reb Meir. And when it comes to redemption, he holds like Reb Meir that you can't do a redemption. Okay, so that would be the pshat in the Mishnah, that we're dealing with a bedek habayis animal that can't be redeemed, and the shechita was no good. Iba yasei mekula Reb Shimon. If you want, really, it could be all of Reb Shimon. V'shani hachad amar kra v'shafach v'chtisa. It's different here because the pasuk says that you spill the blood and you cover it. Misheina mechusar el shvicha v'kisei. Where it needs to be where you slaughter it and then you cover it. Yatzazeh shemechusar shvicha pediya v'kisei. Over here, you need to slaughter it, redeem it, and cover it. This is similar to what it says by a get. You have to write it. You can't have to cut the paper after. It needs to be just 2 steps, without any steps in the middle. You spill the blood and you cover it. Over here, you have to spill the blood, you have to redeem it, and then you can cover it. So there's an extra step. So therefore, you don't have to cover this blood. The Gemara says, once we've reached this level where we have this understanding, we can go back that it really applies to karbanis as well. a regular sacrifice. Over here, by your sacrifice, you need to scrape it off in order to cover it. And that we didn't want to say. That we don't want to say. You spill the blood and then you cover it. The Gemara concludes, Mar Baravashi Amar Amar Krab. Mar Baravashi says, the pasuk says, Chaya Oif. Mar Baravashi is the end of the Amarei period, the very last person on the page. He says, the pasuk says, a wild animal or a bird, Ma Chaya in a Kaddish, Af Oif in a Kaddish. Just like there's no sacrifice of a beast that needs the blood to be covered, there's no sacrifice of a bird. All birds, if a bird is a sacrifice, you don't have to cover the blood. 1 second. There is no such thing as a beast that's a sacrifice. By a bird, it is possible because there are certain birds that are. Tar or ben yaina. The Gemara maybe oitzi tarna ben yaina sheish b'min kaddish. The Gemara says like kechaya. It's like a beast. Ma chaya lechalakta bay afayf leitachlik bay. We don't make any distinctions. Just like a bird, not just like a beast. No distinctions. None of them need to be covered. Also, a bird. None of them need to be covered. Okay, stopped at a good place. We're ahead.
Once the animal's already shepherded
Yeah.
and it's born, you do the redemption of the animal.